Welcome to our session on coffee, cake, and curtains, how food and ambiance help create and still sustain a successful WAC program. I'm Marty Townsend from the University of Missouri, one of the 4 panelists you see. I'm a former director of Campus Writing Program, and I will ask my other 3 co-panelists to tell you who they are.
Hello, I'm Amy Lannin. I am the current director of the Campus Writing Program at the University of Missouri. And I am also an associate professor in English education in the College of Education, and very excited about today's topic and eager to introduce you to the other 2 speakers. So Deborah, let's start with you.
My name is Deborah Huelsbergen. I'm a curator's distinguished teaching professor, and I teach graphic design in the School of Visual Studies. And I've been at MU for, this will be my 25th year coming up.
And I'm Deanna Sharpe. I'm an associate professor in personal financial planning. And I've had the wonderful pleasure of working with both Dr. Townsend and Dr. Lannin when they have been directors of the Campus Writing Program. I've served on the board there. Taught WI since I joined Mizzou, and this past fall was my 25th year, which doesn't sound quite as long as saying you worked a quarter of a century.
And naturally, my 3 co-panelists have reminded me that I neglected to say that I was in the English department. I am now an emerita professor of English from Mizzou and retired in 2015. And with that, we'll get on with our panel. 35 years ago, a faculty task force created the University of Missouri's Campus Writing Program, a WAC-WID program to oversee new writing-intensive courses on our campus. At our large public university, cross-disciplinary collaboration was a challenge, especially when historically siloed academics may not have seen the need, benefit, or purpose of such a program. However, this group of 18 professors did see the need and worked together to develop WI guidelines and to pilot courses taught in the disciplines. The IWAC 2020 call suggests topics on the history of WAC to, quote, celebrate the scholars and programs that have shaped WAC as a movement, unquote. In this panel presentation, we offer perspectives from 2 presenters, a former program director, that's me, and the current program director, Amy, who share how the program built and sustained a WAC movement that helped create a culture of writing at our land-grant institution. We also feature 2 respondents, Deborah and Deanna, who comment on our ideas. Our presentation also celebrates the program's founders and faculty who have taught WI courses. Following the first Campus Writing Board meeting of the fall 2019 semester, our first respondent, Deborah Huelsbergen, an art professor and former member of the board, emailed Amy with her feelings about returning to the board to represent the arts and humanities area for a new 3-year term. I forgot how civilized the meetings are with coffee, cake, and curtains. And what an interesting group it is. It's so nice to see you all again. Cheers.
So over the years, we have had similar messages such as this. And that has been certainly one of the benefits of being in the role as a director in this program. Faculty who are connected to this WAC-WID program find a spirit of goodwill, generosity, and productivity. So this has led us to consider the role of coffee, cake, and curtains. This is part of the work of writing program administration and of writing scholars. The work of teaching with writing is often not recognized or incentivized beyond that personal satisfaction of seeing student learning and getting to know students better through their writing. What might we understand then about writing program features from a historical perspective, one of food and ambience, of hospitality in wider terms? And how might these insights help WPAs plan ahead for future decades? Though many leaders helped to establish the campus writing program, one we want to focus on here in this session, our program's early leader, Dr. Winifred Bryan Horner, stands out for the pioneering approaches she took in leveraging support from university administrators. According to Win, and she is pictured here on the right in the chair, and next to her is Louise Miller, who was the recipient of the Win Horner Award for Excellence in WI Teaching, a very prestigious award that we are happy to give each year. And according to Win, her support of leveraging support for this program was accomplished in part with the aid of a timely delivery of food and drink. So as the story goes, when newly hired Milton Glick arrived in Columbia, Missouri in 1983 to become dean of the College of Arts and Science, Win, who had been on the search committee that hired him, welcomed him and his family to Columbia and their home. As the moving trucks were unloading, Win stopped by with a cooler of beer and sandwiches. When Win returned later to pick up the basket, Dean Glick asked what the college and university needed. And Win suggested that a writing across the curriculum program might be warranted. Collaborating with his new boss, Provost Ron Bunn, Dean Glick convened a campus-wide English composition task force, naming Dr. Horner chair of this working group. Nearly 30 years later, when CWP celebrated Win's 90th birthday, this story, now a well-established part of the program's lore, was told in commemoration of her helping found CWP. So from beer and sandwiches to coffee and cake, Marty and I are going to walk through some of the history of this longstanding WAC initiative to celebrate the scholars who established the program and the role of hospitality or relational leadership to sustain and grow a WAC culture. And I do want to throw in just a little bit before Marty takes us into this idea of China teacups, that Win was very serious about those early morning meetings of the task force, and they needed to be in cups such as this.
I inherited the 5-year-old campus writing program in 1991 from a director who had served for 3 years and 2 interim directors who served for 1 year each. From the outset, though, faculty told of Win Horner's strategic picnic basket diplomacy. I also heard stories about the program's early days and early morning task force meetings, at which Win insisted actually, that coffee be served not in styrofoam, but in China cups. Win wanted to signal to everyone that the task force's members and their work were important to the university. Thus, picnic baskets, beer, and coffee in China cups created not merely lore for a rapidly evolving program, but also helped establish a framework within which the early faculty contributors grounded their work. Elaine Lawless's 2017 memoir of rhetoric and composition legend, Professor Win Horner, along with CWP's program history, published in the WPA Journal, document how these early meetings and activities set a tone of civility that continues to this day. Throughout the years, and even in tight budget times, CWP continues to serve coffee in mugs, many of them brought back from our university's Wakanzi summer program for college faculty on Lake Michigan. Simple snacks of cake and bowls of candy or fruit are staples at any meeting or event.
So as we think about the title of Lace Curtains, the ambience of a home on the historical registry, we want to introduce you to the Conley House. So from its outset, in the mid-1980s, the campus writing program was situated in a nondescript but centrally located 1960s aptly named building, General Classroom Building. It was later renamed named for MU's first African-American history professor, Arva Strickland. What Strickland Hall lacked in architectural grace, it easily regained in locational prominence and ample space for a bustling operation of the campus writing program. But when competition for departmental and classroom space heated up, our desirable location was ceded to another department, and to our chagrin, we were reassigned to this old, dimly lit, musty, somewhat neglected house built in 1867, which had been closer to when this particular photo was taken. It was situated what now would be on a remote edge of campus between two parking garages and a gravel parking lot. Everyone knew that the reportedly haunted Conley House embodied some sort of local history, but few knew how much or knew much about it, and even fewer had been inside the dubious outpost. It fell to us in CWP to make this house our new home. We petitioned for and received some modest support to help with things to upgrade the lighting, hired campus services to clean the tall, grimy windows, and took stock of the 100-year-old family portraits that still hang in the parlors. Not trusting a commercial laundry to clean the vintage lace curtains that were hanging in every window, Marty took them home and washed them on gentle cycle until the aroma of stale cigarette smoke no longer wafted through. And I will say I have continued that practice since. We also researched the history of the house, built by a family instrumental in founding the town of Columbia and the university itself. Years earlier, the house had been designated on a place on the National Historic Registry, and we have invited the remaining members of the prominent Conley family to come to the house for tea and lunch. We've listened to their stories about visiting grandparents who lived here, such as during the time of Pearl Harbor. And we have learned about the dour, darkly dressed figures that are surrounding us in these portraits. Naturally, each of these visits, along with each of the meetings we have hosted in this new home, they've been accompanied by refreshments. And increasingly, we have taken pride to share the Conley House history and architectural features. And the images in front of you now are of the more current views of the Conley House as it is positioned on campus and certainly on an old brick road. Faculty have begun to think of this new home, this old home, as a quaint but gracious destination to which they could come to discuss teaching and learning with program staff and like-minded colleagues. And gradually, as we have welcomed all our guests, the Conley House began to seem less off the beaten path and more like a desirable destination. So Marty's going to take us into thinking about what continues in this work.
We ground our claim of food and ambiance coming together to contribute hospitably to WAC's growth on our campus to several sources. One source is food anthropology, a subdiscipline within the field of anthropology pioneered in the latter half of the 20th century by Yale and Johns Hopkins University scholar Sidney Wilfred Mintz. Known as the father of food anthropology, Mintz's work ultimately led to the study of food culture, which incorporates ethnicity and cultural heritage and provides a mechanism for understanding broad societal processes such as politics, economics, value creation, as well as the social constructs of collective memory. Simply put, say these culinary anthropologists, you cannot study a culture and develop an ethnography of that culture without taking into account the role that food plays. On a scale larger than most people realize, say these scholars, food is not just a part of culture, it can define culture. We humbly suggest that food has helped define CWP and WAC culture on our campus. We also ground our claim on the age-old concept of hospitality. In ancient cultures, hospitality involved welcoming the stranger and offering food, shelter, and safety. Hospitality is the relationship between guest and host, wherein the host receives the guest with some degree of goodwill. It is the way people treat each other and the service of welcoming and receiving guests. Richard Haswell and Janice Haswell's Hospitality and Authoring, an essay for the English profession, notes that hospitality is a social and ethical relationship, not only between host and guest, but also between writer and reader, or teacher and student. We humbly suggest that the food we serve, the shelter of the probably not haunted Conley House, and the safety of knowing that our conversations about teaching and learning are private and protected contribute to CWP's longevity and success. As an aside, I am reminded of a faculty writing workshop that I conducted some years ago for Mary College, a Benedictine institution in Bismarck, North Dakota. St. Benedict's rules for monasteries overtly proclaims hospitality as a key mission. My mandate for working with these faculty to design writing assignments was that every writing assignment, no matter the discipline, had to reinforce hospitality in some way.
So taking this idea of hospitality to our work more currently, also I wanted to think about how in this current role as director, sitting here in the Conley House, connects to some of my early professional experiences. And early on, I became a part of the National Writing Project based out of University of Nebraska at that time for where my site was. And as a secondary English language arts teacher, I was ushered into this very remarkable experience, and one in which teachers were treated as professionals, where university scholars collaborated with teachers, middle school, high school, elementary, all of us. And each day when we would meet for a summer institute, that day included coffee duty, where somebody would come in and make a big pot of coffee, and a few other people would bring in some kind of food to share. And so each day during that institute time of sitting around a circle, writing together, sharing our work together, drinking our coffee together, I learned about this very important role of coming together with colleagues and learning in that way. And that was such a pivotal moment for me, I think, growing as a scholar, as a teacher, as a writer. And again, it was very much around the role that food and that togetherness played. So when I moved from Nebraska to Missouri, and from secondary to post-secondary work, one of the many carryovers was the importance of setting up that environment that was welcoming, the kind of environment Winhorner promoted, and showing colleagues the value we place in their professional collegiality. My first interaction with MU's campus writing program was actually sitting around a table with coffee and breakfast and then lunch as I attended my first workshop and learned about campus writing program and teaching writing intensive courses. And I will say both the theory, the practice, but then also the importance of sharing professionally together in that work at a food table. That was very important to me, getting started at the University of Missouri. And years later, then assuming in the program's leadership role, what has facilitated a civil transition of power has often been over lunch, dinner, or happy hour with Marty and other leaders of the program. So drawing on Haswell and Haswell's hospitality and authoring, Marty and I have shared many points of philosophical and personal connection. Her institutional history has aided the current CWP work, as well as the archives that have been maintained. And this have allowed us for this ongoing checks as to what has been done before and how we can build on that going forth. Regular meetings then for lunch and happy hour or coffee have allowed us to have this open and vital sharing of program history, processes, and plans for the future. Often it is around that dinner table that important program discussions occur.
The concepts of mentoring and civility are deeply meaningful to me personally at this point in our telling of our history. I had directed CWP for 15 years when I moved into the English department full-time. By the time Amy was appointed as the new director, CWP had had 3 different temporary leaders, and the direction of the program was somewhat uncertain. Amy asked whether I would be willing to consult informally with her from time to time as she started her new job. Thus began a series of conversations between us about the program, nearly all of them over coffee, lunch, happy hour, or dinner, the primary times that we could squeeze them in. I was pleased to be reconnected, albeit informally, with the program that had comprised the early part of my career. And now Amy will talk a bit more about the results of that camaraderie over the years.
So from history to now, our CWP current status includes surviving numerous university-wide fiscal retrenchments, something probably everybody can relate to one way or another. And much of the sustaining power of this program is due to that continued faculty buy-in, healthy WI instructor program morale at a time when morale is really taking a hit, and a collaborative get it done attitude. Drawing on Ku's concept of high impact practices, of which WI courses are a part, and McLeod's recognition of relationship building in WAC, we have seen that judicious leadership in WAC programs can help us overcome these challenges. So the faculty buy-in results from the ongoing efforts to support faculty with WI teaching, as well as support for their own writing. So I wanted to mention a little bit about that, because since 2011, the campus writing program has added writing retreats to our list of faculty and instructor outreach. And as writing retreats have gained in popularity, CWP has surveyed attendees to better understand what was happening on those days as faculty would share their writing and time together with graduate students as well, and they'd come together and write. In fact, sitting right here in this room, and I'll try and just span for a little bit, and there we see the curtains, some of the images on the wall. This is the place we come together to work, and this is the place we come together and write. And a few years ago, postdoctoral fellow Lena Trigos-Carrillo and I had done an analysis of some of the data, some of the surveys of people who've attended work here on those writing retreat days. And we found something interesting about the role of camaraderie. And that was a term actually used by an attendee, several attendees, that when people come together in a shared space to write, they find that, just like what our panel here is talking about, that food and time together at a space like this, just like Deborah said, coffee, curtains, that was really important for them to be productive with their own writing. And when we had to look at budget cuts, one of the things that the university said we could not spend money on was coffee and food and things like that. And yet we felt that this is meeting such a basic need. And it also is communicating care and appreciation. And as some of the faculty respondents said, it saves time when they can come here and know that there's going to be something to eat and something to drink. Mm-hmm. So we have found ways to still make that food and coffee part of what happens when somebody steps in the Conley House. So whether it's through our own bringing in of things or finding sponsors, we feel that those are so important. And the research is telling us the same. So next, Marty's going to help us think about the subtle influences of WAC success through the eyes now of 2 of our amazing WI professors.
And this is where we have the pleasure of hearing first from Deborah Huelsbergen, who gave us our title, Coffee, Cake, and Curtains, and then Deanna Sharpe after Deb.
Oops. I lost let me grab I was all ready. So I apologize for moving around so much, but my internet connection at home has been unstable, as have my dogs. So I guess I am talking about my surroundings. So the fact that I've changed my surroundings 3 times isn't that abnormal, maybe. So as a designer and a very visually oriented person, my surroundings and what is around me is so important to both my productivity and my creativity, also my ability to teach, to write, to do anything. I decorate my classrooms. I illegally painted my office on campus. I have posters. I hang, much to everyone's dismay, fairy lights in all of my classrooms so that they can be well lit. We have plants. I've had this dream for years of being able to one day move my program into a real house, a house where we can paint the walls whatever color we want. We can have a deck, we can have a living room, and all the students could work and be in this house. And I promised them I would make lunch every single day. And Rick said he would grill on the deck, my colleague. We talk about this in class, even in the hopes that one day one of our students will be wildly successful and just give me a house. It could happen. I don't see it in my near future, but in the absence of a house, there is the Conley house. And I think it is no secret that I am a little bit obsessed with the Conley house and houses in general, apparently. A few years ago, I designed a coloring book for the University of Missouri campus, and this coloring book was a collection of my mandalas, and the mandalas were based off of abstracted architectural details from my favorite buildings on campus. The Conley House was the first building I designed because it meant the most to me. I love all of the shapes of that building. I am particularly in love with the front door, and it's true that even though I come from this side of campus, I always walk all the way around campus so I can walk in the front door. I love the door. And when I come in the door, then I get to see that beautiful staircase, and that featured prominently in the details of my mandala. I just love it. Having meetings in that space where I do get to have coffee in a real mug and a little piece of chocolate maybe, and I'm sitting around a dining room table with my colleagues, it makes me at ease. I find I'm better able to concentrate on the meeting, to concentrate on the work we are doing there, and to not be constantly looking at my phone to see when the meeting is over. Not that I would ever do that in another meeting, but I'm less likely to do it here. Now, I know that that has a lot to do with wonderful people, and being here 25 years, I've worked with all of these wonderful people, but it has to do with the space and the ambiance too, not just the people there. I taught my first writing intensive course 22 years ago. It was my third year. I was unbelievably nervous. I'm a visual person. I'm not a writer. I don't feel comfortable with writing. And I was so nervous. I can't punctuate to save my own life. And I went to the Conley House, and they sat down with me in the living room with a cup of something, tea or coffee, and they calmed me and they helped me work through that class. And I have been happily teaching writing intensive classes since that time. And they are honestly one of my very, very favorite classes to teach. I think it's sort of hard to explain, but I believe that kind of the care and the nurturing that comes from not only the people there, but just the space and the surroundings. I feel like it just sort of flows through those of us who are lucky enough to be in that space. And it gives me confidence and direction in teaching that I might otherwise be a little nervous about. I tell everyone they should be on this committee. I tell everyone they should interact with the campus writing program. I'm so thankful for you all.
Deborah, thank you. And I love the images, and you help me to see things differently and the focus in on those details of the places that surround us. Wonderful. What a gift. All right. So Deanna Sharpe, share with us your thoughts next.
You know, when I think of the Conley House and reflect, I think about where is it that we tell our best stories? Isn't it when we push back from the table at those broad family gatherings and someone starts, hey, remember? And another jumps in, oh yeah. And as that story tapers off, somebody asks, well, what about? And then another request, hey, tell me. And those tales of family history and shared experience around that table begin to flow and mingle and really shape our view of who we are, why we are, and what we too could accomplish if we dare to embrace adventure. You know, I've heard that in tribal cultures, family is described as those who cook together. And I remember sitting at that long, sturdy table there in the Conley house, in that cozy dining room, flanked by curtains, floral wallpaper, the fireplace that we see there behind Amy, the bookcases that are off to the left, and those framed family faces. And I remember sitting there with WI staff and other faculty, peeling mandarin oranges, munching on mini muffins, passing a bowl of chocolates around, and fetching that second cup of steaming coffee as we share food for thought. Now, some of that food for thought was deftly prepared, well cooked in the fires of experience. Some of it was a little raw, and honestly, some was still in seed form, kind of rattling around in the package with hopes of planting it maybe in the upcoming season. I've had a lot of those seeds. WI cuisines were shared around that table as a biology professor learned scaffolding techniques from a theater professor, how a social science professor talked with the nursing faculty about how they used case studies in the way they structured their WI classes, and a business faculty learned from English faculty about grading techniques in this wild and wonderful family that's brought together across the table, serving food and WI techniques and strategies. Though the family come to the Conley House from varied academic disciplines, all of us resonate with this like passion and purpose of developing students' critical thinking skills via well-constructed writing assignments. You know, as Deborah made so clear for us, surroundings shape our expectations. What we see matters, where we are matters. A house differs from an office or a classroom in offering a space of welcome acceptance versus one that seems to compel performance. The life of a house comes from those who live within it. All of those I've ever known to gather at the Conley House table share the same ethos of all healthy families. Be welcoming, hospitable, be kind, listen first, nurture, support, teach, challenge, correct, encourage, and build vision. You know, teaching WI is honestly, it's an above and beyond effort. It can be challenging and frankly, very tiring to correct for what seems like the 1,000th time the same error the students always make. The possessives, the homonyms, etc. But when encouragement and have you tried, or what if you, and hey, here's another tool or technique kind of conversation is needed, it's so good to be able to come back to the table at Conley House, have a gentle conversation over coffee with the fabulous WI staff about WI life and how we can improve what we do on behalf of our students. Because after all, at a family table, you're never alone. Always appreciated all of you.
Deanna, Deb, thank you both so very much. You really have captured the essence of what Amy and I were trying to do with this session, and you've just summed it all up so beautifully. We're at the summing up part now, so we just have a few more words from Amy and from me. I'll note that Berg and Sieber's popular book from 2016 titled The Slow Professor, Changing the Culture of Speed in the Academy, about slowing down our work to take a deeper look at our work, might provide our major takeaway. Perhaps our emphasis on food, ambiance, and hospitality is an aspect of slowing down that would enable other WAC programs to help sustain themselves and be successful. At this point, we want to pause and remember with enormous gratitude the 200 WI teachers every single year who teach some 300 writing intensive classes every single year at Mizzou. We are very grateful for them and for you, Deb and Deanna. The two of you are standing in today to represent a whole cadre of people, and we are grateful to you.
We couldn't have done it without you.
Amy, take it away.
Well, just some final thoughts as we realize here we are on Zoom. We're not together in the same place. We're still in the final, after effects of a pandemic. And we know that normally we would all be together at this conference and not trying to do a Zoom recording. So this session's topic took on new meaning when all of the in-person work and the time together at the table with the curtains and the coffee, that all halted in March of 2020. We lost so much at that time. But now as we are slowly returning to our workspaces, to the Conley House, we know the importance of this place, the ambience of when we are actually together in the same place. And it is so good to once again be sitting together in this building, but also sitting, I'm truly at the table that's this 100-year-old table that was salvaged from the library and repurposed for the very work of having campus writing board meetings. It is this sense of place that we know is so important to this work. Its warmth, its collegiality, its productivity. It's been amazing that we've been able to do really good work still in the virtual places through Zoom and joining and seeing one another's places and homes as we come together. And we were able to still continue so much of that over the last year and a half. But we know that coming together, being in person, is still what we want to see happen. So we hope future conferences we're all together, that we will bring that coffee and cookies we originally were going to bring for our session. We hope all of you in this time of joining us virtually with going and grabbing a cup of coffee or whatever, maybe it's a beer and sandwich. But we know that the WAC and IWAC conference ethos, as Marty had mentioned in the historical piece that she wrote, it's a friendly, open, congenial, good-natured group. And these are qualities that are characterizing the field of WAC itself. And we are so thankful to be part of that. So from Missouri, we wish you all wonderful conference for IWAC 2021 with memories of 2020. So thank you all.
Happy writing.
Looks like Malka has a hand raised.
Oh, please, Melka, what are you thinking about?
Hi, yeah, so I really enjoyed your presentation, but it seemed very focused on food with faculty. And I'm wondering if you have any food with students observations.
My first food with student memory comes from Naomi's doctoral defense. It somehow became a very weird custom on our campus for the doctoral student who's being examined at her final defense to bring food in and feed the professors. Now that strikes me as an aberrant example and an aberrant thing to do, but I remember she brought in some Spanish nuts or something that you had made. At any rate, we don't have a robust intersection of food with students that I can cite for you, Malka. And the reason that occurs to me is that we see ourselves primarily as a faculty development initiative. Those of us who work with Campus Writing Program are more connected with all of the other faculty on campus than we are with individual students. We formerly had a tutoring writing center But that was merged with the larger writing center on campus. So those tutors for some time now haven't reported directly to us. When they did, we would have tons of food up and down the hallway in the former general classroom building, especially at holiday time. But that hasn't been the case for quite a number of years now. Naomi, do you have any memories to add to that?
Not particularly. I know I taught a composition course for several semesters on the topic of food, and since it's there's a large ag business component there, that was kind of an intersection. But and it made for interesting discussions and interesting papers on the part of students. But that really was, aside from the WAC program, really wasn't directly related to that.
Thank you.
Anybody else got thoughts they'd like to shout out? Sherry, please go ahead.
Marty, I'm fascinated by the audience here right now outside of Reuben. It's an all female presenting space, but also thinking about food whenever I think about it, also having taught food in my first year comp classes, but thinking about how much of a gendered conversation this becomes when we think about women, and women in particular in administrative roles, then feeding other folks as a way of community building, as a way of coming together, as a very caring act and motherly act in a way. And then my own research on Black women doing administrative work and sort of becoming de facto mothers, and some of the duality of that when we look at admin work and Black women in particular. I wondered if you had any thoughts about this very feminist work that's tied to feeding others, but also, how natural or unnatural is it for then men to adopt these kinds of practices and not make them feel so strange?
Sherry, I think your question is really interesting, and it ties directly to a question that I asked yesterday of Carol Roots at the end of her opening plenary talk. Completely unrelated to anything she spoke about in that talk, I asked whether in her experience and history she had noticed what Susan Miller has taught us to think about as the feminization of composition, and whether there were parallels to be drawn between composition studies and writing across the curriculum. Carol gave a long, thoughtful answer on the spur of the moment, which gives her huge kudos in my book, but didn't have any hard data at the tips of her fingers, unsurprisingly. Several other people chimed in with citations that they knew of, but there were more in the chat section comments about how difficult it would be to calculate or quantify any kind of drawing the men into these so-called feminization aspects of WAC. I don't want to presume to do it. But I want to follow all of those citations when they're posted. So guys out there, Reuben, or do we have any other guys here even? I don't know. Feel free to chime in. I can tell you we have had male program coordinators in campus writing program, and they partook of the same traditions and hospitality making that we did. When you happen to be seeing all female faces on the panel right now, but we have male people we could have pulled in, and you're reminding me in the future we will do that. I've had so much fun with this, putting this together, that I volunteered to stretch it out into an article And we'll see where that goes, but I'm going to get Andy White involved with that, who used to work for us as coordinator of our tutors. Andy's a fabulous cook, and I'm going to his house for dinner in a few weeks. So I know they're out there. I know they can be found. Does anybody else want to chime in with a comment on that topic? Please, Tony, go ahead.
Hi. So I actually am an assistant professor in the culinary arts department. And
director, thank you for coming today.
Writing across the curriculum. So this is an interesting comment. And it's something that I've been thinking about a lot, because I kind of think that every student should take a culinary course, right? Because it handles food insecurity and teaches math in a contextual way, and writing and following directions. But I got involved with writing across a curriculum. And so almost everybody through the Center of Teaching and Learning at Westchester Community, which is almost all male. Now, also my culinary department, because we all are professional chefs, is all male, except for me. So, professional chefs have a history of being male, since before electricity, when you actually had to grind things by hand. And so it's kind of interesting, the flip side, right? Because outside of WCC, it seems to be more female dominated. But at WCC, it's kind of the opposite. And culinary itself is still very male dominated.
This conversation is spinning off in unusual ways that I hadn't expected. I went a couple of weeks ago to see the movie about Anthony Bourdain and his life. Now, there is one of the world's best known chefs who simultaneously is one of the world's best known writers. The books that Anthony Bourdain wrote about his travels and how those travels intersected with food are amazing. But I wouldn't have put that together with this panel until the audience brought it up. So that's the beauty of these sessions.
So WAC for us is only in its third year. So we're really just getting our feet wet and trying to get people involved. And we do have great turnout for our meetings, because I'm always able to glom food, right? So my class is always making food. But I think that you bring up this really good point, that we don't kind of have a permanent place, right? Sometimes we're in the dining room, sometimes we're in a kitchen, sometimes we're not even there and we're carting food. And I think that's the bigger part of hospitality, that to me, it almost seems like it might be more important, is that space rather than the food. I'm not really sure, but I know we have one part, but we don't have the other. And that's really lacking. And as you were talking about it, like where can we carve out this permanent space? And I think that's really important. But
your comments make me doubly sorry that we've lost that portion of the tape that have our two teachers on it, because both of them in their remarks spend more time talking about the space of Conley House and what it meant to come together in that kind of alternative space, if you will, that isn't anything at all like a classroom or a meeting room on our campus. It's an old house, as you can see. It's on the National Historic Register, but nobody really understood why until we began sort of trying to lure in our faculty by talking about it. But they speak to what happens when there is a space around which people can sit down at a table and think and work together. Sherry Craig has said in the chat room, would or do a neutral space, a non-English writing space, make a difference when considering across the curriculum? I'm going to do what every teacher does and turn that question back to Sherry, who submitted it. What do you think, Sherry?
Darn. I'm so fascinated by how many times we have our faculty across the curriculum come to the English department building. One, because it's one of the ugliest, most depressing buildings on campus. And so we get to share that with everyone. But also really thinking about like writing lives here and English lives here when we're trying to spread the opposite of that conversation. But I think there's also like this double-edged sword of if we are going to them, then it's, well, we don't have a home. There's like no ownership of that discipline if we're not coming to our space. And so I think I'm trying to not exactly be devil's advocate, but really think around like, where is a space where there's like no dibs, I suppose. And so thinking about a historical home that just associated with the campus is really great because there's so much comfort, I think, in our own buildings and in our own spaces, that to take faculty out of that can sometimes make conversations hard, but to take ourselves out of our own comfort might also make our home, our ownership of some of that information, that expertise level challenging. I think it plays with both sides of what's great about WAC and what's so great about expertise about writing is that everyone has it, but where does it live? And so thinking about these kind of conversations, where they live, I think sometimes can be difficult to find those institutional, like, okay, our writing meetings live here, right? Where is that place?
Yeah. I'm curious what Lauren has to say about this.
So yeah, actually that's like my research focus is on writing spaces. So you talking about having this space, I find so interesting. And I think too, it like speaks to the university seeing some value in what you're doing too, that they like, because if the university isn't willing to give a space or designate a space, like what are they trying to tell you about what you're doing? Then it's like, well, just work wherever. But to follow up too on like what Sherry was saying, that makes me think too that like, you know, writing happens everywhere. But I think too about like first year writing instructors where like, we don't have classrooms, we get put wherever there's a space for us, then like wherever we can go essentially, because there's often so many classes. But yeah, it's really got my wheels turning of like, well, where should WAC be for our campus? And, you know, should they be coming to us? Should we be somewhere else? Should we be going to them? Yeah.
And this is still very much a question that you and your nascent program are working through. Have you yet been assigned the space that you will have, or is that coming down the road still?
I don't know if it's on anybody's radar even.
Well, guess what you get to do?
Yeah.
You can get out there and scout around campus and see what you might be able to find. I will tell you that when we were assigned to the Conley House, we were not happy. We mounted a semester-long protest and gathered as much data as we could from other WAC programs around the country. How many square feet did they have? How central were they to campus? How many students did they serve? We tried to pull in every data point that we could to convince them to leave us in our architecturally nondescript cement building block Arva Strickland Hall. So we really faced a challenge about how to turn this outpost into a welcoming destination. And the fact that it worked over time still kind of amazes me. Naomi, by the time you were coming there for various things as a grad student, do you recall any of your feelings about coming into that old house? And what that meant for writing?
Right. I mean, I think at that time, but by that time, yeah, it was a destination. You know, I mean, that was my perception of it. And it was news to me, you know, when I learned, you know, sometime later that had used to be in the general classroom building. I couldn't imagine it. It just seemed like it was right where, you know, where it should be. But I mean, and I do think like it's near where it is now, you know, it's near the administration building. I mean, so like looking at it from some of those perspectives, it's, you know, it's not, it's central to, I guess there in the general classroom building, it was more central to classes and faculty offices and that kind of thing. But I think it really gave it a retreat, an atmosphere of a retreat space. And so like those Fridays when faculty were invited to come and just do their own writing, and, you know, they would have a quiet place on campus where they could, you know, hide out from their offices and the distractions there and come and write together. You know, it really, that really helped promote that feeling of retreat.
I think that retreat idea may be a part that got cut out of Amy's remarks toward the end of the video. She talks about mounting those retreats and how much people like coming over there to hang out now. Ruben, what's on your mind?
Well, trying to, well, Sherry was, she mentioned that I was the only guy here. And indeed,
let me apologize for calling on you, thinking that you could represent every man in the universe.
No, don't worry, no problem at all. My background, I guess, would be, or is very different from what from what I've seen so far since yesterday in all the different presentations. And I started out as an English teacher, as an EFL teacher for the National University here in Mexico. And we were, until 4 years ago, we were a center, it was a language center. Now it's grown into a school, and there's applied linguistics and there's translation, and it has grown, but we are right in the middle of the campus, which is a huge campus, and students, and this has to do with what you were saying about spaces. And students usually come from their own schools or facultades, the way we call them here, and they take classes there. And for them, it's in a way, like Naomi was saying, it's a retreat, because they get away from their regular teachers, their regular classmates, and it becomes a space that they can share with other students from other majors, where they can talk about other things. So they actually do enjoy that quite a lot. This school now has been there for a little bit over 50 years. And in all of those 50 years, only once has there been a director that is male. The rest of the director, we change directors every 4 years. All of them have been women. Most of the teachers there are language teachers, and most of them are female. I'm always the minority. And writing teachers, in the English department, there are only 4 of us, and I'm the only male one. So I guess, I don't know. I don't know if there's something there that in general, I would say that women are more, I'm generalizing, of course, hospitable in very general terms, and they have this there's this motherly sense to them. And I don't know if necessarily because they're women, but in general, students, I think, prefer to take classes with women teachers rather than male teachers, at least language classes and where I work. I don't know of any study regarding that, so I can't really explain it. What I do know is that they enjoy coming to our place in order to get away from their places. For them, it's they just really enjoy it. It's a very enjoyable time. As far as writing, we're beginning to have a writing center right now, and I'm part of that group of teachers who are starting it. So when I hear all of your experiences, all that you have done, and and all of the work that is to be done, it's a little bit overwhelming. But at the same time, it's interesting and it's a challenge. And I will not be, and I'm not the one in charge of the Future Writing Center, but I am part of that group. So I think we have a meeting later tonight. So I have a lot of things to share with them. And
I'm glad
that's it.
to hear that you have a lot to take forward with you. I will also reply that the writing program you're hearing about from me is 30 years old. We've been around now for a long time, and we've done a lot of things very imperfectly, but we've managed to survive nonetheless. And my co-panelists, who unfortunately couldn't be with me, would tell you, I think, that the food and the ambiance of the house have a little bit to do with our longevity and our continuity. At the same time, and I'm speaking now a little bit directly to Lauren, because of everybody on the screen, I know she's the one who's also moving into the leadership position for a new WAC program. It is challenging. It can be overwhelming. Don't let it be. Let it be fun. If you get good people around you, the way we've been fortunate to do, and to have people like Naomi, and Amy and Deborah and Deanna, who were on the videotape with me, the two faculty members there talk even more than Amy and I do about what fun it was to come together in that space and to eat mini muffins and chocolate together while we hashed out our ideas. And they had some amazing metaphors that they brought to bear on their descriptions of that process. So once again, I'm going to plug watching this whole panel video when it finally does get found and get up. I'm wondering if there are other thoughts out there that we can collect while we're still live. We have 4 minutes left allotted to us. Anyone got thoughts they want to share? Rachel? Oh, Rachel, go. Let's hear from you.
Picking up on what Malcolm mentioned and what Sharon mentioned, I work with graduate students, and providing them with food and writing retreats and places like that. What I notice, not only about the gender of the person giving the food, but that it makes a big difference. I hear often from women, graduate students, that nobody else looks after them like this, right? That they often feel like they themselves are, responsible for playing that role. And when I create this writing space that also is a hospitable space where they feel a little bit of that sense of care for them as holistic care, rather than just them as sort of brains in a vat, that they experience something different because of their own care responsibilities, I think, in their regular lives or as graduate students are often quite significant, and that to find a space where they can receive some care as well can be a really interesting thing.
Mm-hmm. Hospitality, as St. Benedict mandated. Annie in the comments says, as a grad student, I think that experience would also help assuage the imposter syndrome that so many of us experience as we enter the discipline. There is another wonderful connection. Our most recent former graduate student who worked with the program did his doctoral research and dissertation on the imposter syndrome. And so his work, he was certainly a male representative for our program, but there again, we're bringing in another aspect that I hadn't even thought about that should come into play. So thank you for that comment. How are we doing on time here, Annie? We have a minute left. Anybody want to have the final word? If not, I'll take it just by thanking all of you for being here. bravo to all of you. And I'm sure we'll have a list of who was here when this is all over, so we can send you all a friendly email when the video is up, and we're going to think about how can we attach a cookie to go with that. Had this meeting been in Fort Collins, we were going to have coffee and cookies with our panel. So thank you all. Have a good rest of your conference.
Thank you.